Hi everyone, I'm Aqua. This is going to be a video explaining the new Wingle Aqua Pooch extended fight minute. There is a lot to go over and a lot of things I want to cover, so there's going to be like 3 different sections of the video. I'm going to explain the minute, I'm going to explain how to find your offsets accurately for this minute, and then I'm gonna add in some other things at the end. But let's explain the manip first. So, what the goal of the manip is that you want to use your current Wingle manip offsets and add to them, so that way you can extend a manip into the Aqua Pooch fight. Ideally, this will give you multiple chances to crit on different turns. You'll avoid Sand Attack, and regardless of any of the outcomes, you'll likely still get a better fight than on average compared to doing the fight on Manip. If you've played Sapphire Emerald before, you know absolutely how annoying of a fight that the Pooch Manip, or that the Pooch fight can be in Forest. And just like how many possible different outcomes you could get. Like, you could die to the fight, you can get a good fight, you can get a fight that loses 10, 20, 30 seconds. This fight was all over the place. So the goal was to make this fight consistent and not a worry. Before I go into an example showing off the manip, I want to explain the difficulty with it first. So, also, if it looks like I'm looking away from the camera, I needed to write a whole script for this video, so just bear with me. So battle manips are notoriously hard and inconsistent, and this manip is definitely no exception. However, given time to practice and a lot of time to figure out your offsets, you should be able to make this manip mostly consistent. Or, at least, like I said before, you'll still end up getting a better fight than average. When it comes to my recommendation on the manip, I would say any level of runner can try and learn and attempt the manip. But if you're a newer runner, this manip isn't going to be as beneficial to you as improving other aspects of your gameplay, like movement, fight knowledge, anything like that. That's almost always going to be a way better time save for you than trying to put a ton of time into making this work. But once you're ready for it, it is there. And if you are a person that has a good time in the game, or at least you think so, and you can consistently hit 3-frame windows, so you're likely already YOLO balling Kyogre, then I would say you should absolutely do this manip. It's going to allow you way more runs past Aqua Pooch, and way less worrying about losing your pace on the fight. Okay. So, I'm going to mute the game really quick, and I'm going to show an example of how the fight should go when everything goes great. So, going to disappear for a second. And this is how the manip should work. This video is continued right after you catch the Wingle, so everything that is going to be shown is going to be what you're adding to your current Wingle manip. And we got a path. Good. Now let's just hope I answer the fight on even. Nice. Okay, so that was how this manip should go. Ideally, you want to arrive to the fight at a certain time, enter the battle at a certain time, and if you did, you have a chance to crit each of the first 3 turns. You obviously only need 2 plus 1 other hit to kill, so getting any 2 of them will work. Now I'm going to replay the video, and I'm going to explain what each... Ignore that. I'm going to explain what each part of the manip, like what the beeps mean for each part. Sorry, wasn't expecting that, but you'll hear my commentary over it this time. Let's bring it back. Okay. I'm also going to be pausing to explain further in detail. Okay, so you heard a set of 5 beeps there. That is the don't nickname A press or B press that you're aiming for. The reason why you need a set of beeps here is because RNG is advancing twice as fast while you're at this part of the manip. So any little mistake that you do is going to be doubled. So you want to time this A press so you're making sure that you're spending the same amount of time in the fight every single time, and just like getting to the next set of beeps at a consistent time as well. I'm going to continue. So that was the next set of beeps. This is, I would say, the closing menu set of beeps. What this does is this input is going to determine the NPC movements that you see in Forest, since this is basically just timing when you're going to enter the forest. The goal of this A press is you want to land within a 5-frame window and do a certain set of movement, so that way you always get to the Devon guy. So I'll just keep playing it. You want to get to the Devon guy at the same point in RNG every time.
And we got a path.
No matter which of the paths that you get. Let's see. I know the frame that you want to arrive to Devon guy at is frame 50, RNG frame 5165. And there's a 5-frame window. Depending on how you change up your movement, all of them will get to Devon guy at that exact point in RNG. So I'll let the video play out a little bit more. The next beat that's coming up,
hope I answered the fight on even,
is going to be clearing the come and battle me text box. So I'll pause when that one appears. So it's that one. You're about to hear like the last set of beeps for me to clear it and enter the fight. So the reason why this is a timed input is because when you go into a fight, your RNG starts advancing by 2. So depending on the frame that you press A to start entering the fight, from that point on, your RNG frames are either all going to be odd numbers or they're all going to be even numbers. In this manip, you really want to end up on the even parity, because the even parity has like the crit windows on all 3 of the first turns. Odd only gets 1 frame on turn 1, but there's things that can happen where even if you land on odd, it's not that bad. But ideally, you always want to enter on the same frame that gets you into the fight on even parity. So I'll play it out a little more. So that was another timed A press. That was clearing the Team Aqua Grunt wants to battle text. So this A press determines what move Pooch is going to use on turn 1. Part of the whole reason this fight sucks is because you could get Sand Attack and get your accuracy lowered, making the fight likely 1 to who knows how many turns longer if you aren't able to hit through sand or multiple sands. So this timed A press is to land within a window where you're guaranteed to not see sand as Pooch's turn 1 move. So gonna play it out from here. So from here on out, basically, the only timed A presses are when to use your tackles. Obviously, you're trying to land on the frames that crit. Not exactly the case for turn 1, but I'll explain that as we go further along. So I'll just let it play out. There's a couple of different sets of beeps you'll hear. So there, I hit another one for the turn 2 tackle, and in this video, I get the crit. But you also hear another set of beeps right before, or right after I press A. The reason why that set of beeps is there is because, depending on the move you see Poochyena use, your previous turn could last longer than you're expecting. The first set of beeps lines up to a 2-frame crit window on even, but like I just said, depending on the move you see, you might not be able to make it just because the turn takes too long. So that's why there is a second set of beeps. The second set of beeps lines up to a, in quotes, 3-frame crit window, but the middle frame doesn't crit. So frame 1 and frame 3 crit, frame 2 doesn't. But basically, you're just trying to... The whole point of that is, like, in almost every case, no matter what you see on turn 1, you'll have an offset that can crit on turn 2 if you're uneven. So I'll play it out again. And there you heard what is like normally the last set of beeps if everything went right in the manip, because you should get your second crit on that turn. Turn 3 lines up to what is, once again in quotes, a 5-frame window to crit if you're on even. However, the second frame doesn't work. So out of the 5 frames, frame 1, 3, 4, and 5 will all get a crit if you're on even parity. There's also some more beeps a little bit after this, I think. Nice. Oh, yeah, so it started, but the clip doesn't last long enough. There's one more set of beeps after this, which is for a 4th tackle offset. I'll show it in another example I'm about to do, but the whole idea of the next set of beeps after this is that the idea is you're probably not going to get a 2 crit fight every single time. So sometimes you're still in the fight by the time the 4th turn rolls around. The idea was you may have gotten like a sand or 2 at that point. So the 4th tackle is only built around hitting frame windows in which you will hit through sand. That way, if something goes wrong in the manip, you still have something at the end that can help guide you. And make it more likely that you don't have a bad fight. But okay, so that's essentially how every beep of this manip works. I'm going to switch scenes to this. Okay. I also need to bring up the other clip. Okay. So here's a much smaller video and a different fight I do. But it should work for this example. The real important part is I want to show off the notes. So really quick, I'll have the notes for this document linked in the description. But the notes are pretty decently complicated, so I'm just going to go through what every part of it means super quick before I go into the next example. So lists out the goals at the beginning, the offsets. This is for links for BizHawk and links for the Gen 3 Lua, which are important, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. It shows you what every single offset determines. And then extra notes, some visual cues, maps for the movement, and stuff like that, as well as listed frames. So this document pretty much assumes that you already know everything about Wingle, so I'm just going to pick up off of the new stuff. And it shows you the different cues for the different NPC movements you'll see, but I'll go over that too. And then notes basically for every part of the manip. So enter battle for parity, the one where you're timing your entry into the fight. And then there's all of these charts that I am going to explain with the example. Using these charts, you should be able to tell where you are in the manip or what kind of results you're getting. And that's helpful for one, determining your offset, but also it'll eventually help you know how to play out the fight during the manip and like decide if you need to abandon early or something, or if it's worth waiting for the turn 3 crit. That was the other thing I wanted to mention, was that in the last video you saw, I probably waited 6 whole seconds before I used tackle on turn 3. It was worth it because I got the crit and I knew I was on even parity. However, that is a long time to wait. It's not always a 6-second wait, because once again, it depends on the moves you see before then. But in the shortest scenarios, you still have to wait a really long time for that turn 3 offset. In fights that you know you're not on even, so you're not even going to line up to a crit frame, it's more worth it to just abandon the manip at some point and just play it out. That way you're not wasting all this extra time for manip to A presses that aren't going to help you. Like I said, there's a bunch of different charts, and you'll see how these should be read when I play this example. So I'm going to play an example. It's going to start up right from the fight. And I actually talk through it a little bit on like what I'm seeing and how I'm determining how to play out the rest of the fight. So I'll just let this clip play.
Okay. I think we got a shot. That's a high roll.
So right there, you heard me say that was a high roll. So looking at the notes, I'm looking at turn 1 tackle. There's this one. This is the A press for clearing the common battle, or not clearing that one. It clears the Team Aqua Grunt would like to battle while you're in the battle, the one right before you send out your Pokemon. But you heard me say I got a high roll, so I can look at this chart and I can see that, oh, I high roll on 7338 and I high roll on 7343. There's no other frames nearby that get a high roll. So I know for sure that means when I pressed A, I either pressed A on frame 7338 and I entered the fight on even parity, or I pressed A on frame 7343 and I entered on odd parity. In this clip, I already know from training my offsets that I wouldn't normally be around frame 7338, so I'm pretty sure I hit 7343 and got that tackle high roll on odd parity entering the fight. So I'm going to continue. Oops. Edited the document.
Okay, I'm back on even, so this should crit.
So you just heard me say I'm back on even, so turn 3 should crit. I'll explain that in a second. So the first important thing to note when it comes to this is that I saw Sand Attack, which prompted me to say that, okay, now I know I'm on even. And that's because whenever you get sand attacked, or you or the Pooch misses tackle, your RNG shifts parities. So if any of those things happen, and let's say you started on odd parity, after that occurs, you will be on even parity, and vice versa. Also, so I'm going to scroll a little bit more, and here you see a different chart. So this one, I already know for the most part that I'm on odd because I got the tackle high roll, and that's way closer to around what I'm trying to hit. So this chart reads, this is the move that you saw on turn 1, and this is the one highlighted in yellow is the resulting move that you'll see turn 2. So I got tackle high roll, which is probably 73-43, as we saw before. And it started the fight by using tackle. And on 73-43, if he uses tackle, that means you will get sand on turn 2, which is exactly what happened in this fight. So even though I started on odd, I got tackle and I got sand on turn 2, which pushed me back to even. So I knew that I can still wait to time this A-press and get the crit on this turn. So that's how you would read the document to try and help yourself determine what parity you're on, what frames you're hitting, things like that. This example is going to have the next set of beeps too, the turn 4 offset beeps. So you can see Pooch is using another sand attack, so now I've been sanded twice. And that was a very long turn. The 4th turn offset, you can normally hit it under any circumstances. A move like what just happened in this fight is the longest case scenario, which is you get a crit during that turn, and he uses one of the slow moves, which is Howl and Sand Attack. Now, the way that the turn 4 offset is designed is I purposely made it so that way it sounds like it has 3 extra beeps after the last offset. So if you normally use 5 beeps for all your manips, your turn 4 offset is going to beep 8 times. The way you want to do that is if you can make the 5th beep, you will aim for the 5th beep every time, and you'll be in a 7-frame window in which no matter what parity you're on, you're going to hit through at least one sand. However, if you don't have the timing, like in this run, to hit it by the 5th beep, an extra 3 beeps play, and you would use the 8th beep to help you align yourself to a different 7-frame window in which you will guaranteed hit through one sand. In order to get this to work, I couldn't make the offset at the very end too specific because I had to line it up exactly 1500 milliseconds after the last one ended in order to get it to sound like it was 8 beeps. And what this does is, I'm going to scroll in the notes. Here. I was too lazy to have a full chart for it, but this is for the 8th beep offset. And essentially what happens is your 8th beep lines up to 1 frame late of the window that you're trying to hit. So basically, if you can't make the 5th beep, what you want to do is you want to hit just slightly early of the 8th beep, which is what I do in this video. I'll rewind to 10 seconds so it's more obvious. Easy. Okay. So that was that example, and that was how I would use the notes to help me determine, and using the different fight outcomes to also help me determine what frames I'm hitting and how I should act for the rest of the fight. Like in that scenario, I figured I entered on odd, but as soon as I saw sand, I knew don't abandon the manip. I can still hit the turn 3 crit. So let's see. So I did that. Okay. So that's how all the battle stuff works and how you would use the fight cues to determine where you're at in the fight and what you're hitting. The next most important thing to go over is going to be the NPC paths. So I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of the notes, and I'm going to show BizHawk now. We're going to go here. So, oh wait, I can't do that. I need to open up BizHawk myself. Okay. So, I have this lined up to show all the different NPC queues, and knowing how the forest NPC paths work is pretty important, and like, not going to sugarcoat it, it is definitely hard to identify in the moment. My best piece of advice is that you record yourself doing attempts and you just review afterward if you got the correct NPC path. Because I'm telling you, a lot of these will look the same, and this is because the bug catcher is a type C spinner, so he can spin pretty quickly. But I'll load it up. So in the notes, I'll actually just bring up the notes one more time. In the notes, you have this whole section here that shows NPC direction, the window that you want to hit, and like what path you need to do in order to arrive at Devon Guy at the RNG that you're looking for. So you'll see the terms like stuck down, left after leaving grass, down on third to last grass tile, left one early of forced right. Probably looks like a bunch of nonsense. I'm going to explain what all of those mean. So this first example, I'm going to go over frame 4499 and what that looks like. So this is listed as left one tile early of forced right. And why I say forced right is because, let me actually just go back to this and get rid of that. We're going to go back to in-game. So I can show off this example. I should have had a Game Boy connected. I'm an idiot. But just like any other spinner in the game, this spinner has certain tiles that you run to that can force him to look a certain direction. Okay, the Game Boy's on. So for this Manip, I already sprayed a max repel, but the movement is going to be up and then left here. You want to be one below the grass. The rest of the movement after this point can be different, but up until this point, you're always going to be doing the same stuff. Let me get back below him. So really quick, some good info to know is that running onto this tile that I'm on right now is going to force the bug catcher to look right, which you see there. If I do this a tile early, he's not going to be forced to look in any direction. He just stays looking wherever he was looking. But as soon as I run this tile, he'll be forced to look right. So if the notes say one tile early of forced right, that means instead of turning right as you enter this tile, for the specific example in the notes, as you're running onto this tile is when he turns right. So that's one tile early of forced right because he wasn't forced into looking right, but he chose to look right as you went onto this tile. Okay. I'll jump back to console for another example later. But let's go back to BizHawk for now. So, like I said, we're going to go over frame 4499 and what that looks like right now. So let's open up BizHawk. And you'll see left one tile early of forced right. So you should know what tile that he'll turn left on. This is by far the easiest cue to identify if you get it. I'm going to play it frame by frame, and then I'll try and play it through at normal speed, so that way you know what it looks like. But basically, you're running, and you know as soon as you start going onto this next tile, he looks left. It's literally that early. You're on this tile, and as soon as you're running onto the next one, turns left, and then because you're running onto this tile, he's going to be forced to look back right. So that's frame 4499. The next one and the next path would be frame 4500. Let me load that. So that one just lists stuck down. And what that means is he will not look right until he is forced to look right. So obviously he's not going to do any NPC movements here until he's forced to, but it would look like this. As soon as I get onto this tile, yep, he looks right. So he basically didn't turn at all, didn't do any NPC movements. That's why I list as stuck down. The other beginning for frames like 4501 and 4503 is going to be right after passing sign. So I'm right here, like this close to the sign. As soon as I start my animation to go onto the next tile, that's when this spinner is going to look right. So you'll see here, and there it is. He looks right as soon as I'm about to go onto that tile. This is different. My bad. Let me go back here. This is different than other paths that say... Do I even have one in the notes? Let me double check. Stuck down. Oh, okay, 4491. Starts left. So that means before you even passed this sign, like as he's loading in right here, you can already tell he is facing left. That's going to be, any NPC that's like that is going to be really hard to tell, since the next opportunity for them to spin would be as you're passing the sign. Oh, yeah, I loaded the wrong one. Because the next opportunity for them to spin is going to be this early. So it'll be hard to tell. My general advice is going to be, if as you're passing the sign, you see him looking right, then you probably hit this NPC path, and you just need to use the second cue to make sure that you actually got this path. So I'm going to show what that last NPC path looks like. The only one that doesn't have an NPC path like this is path C, where it says stuck right. And that is because when you play through, let's just do this, or actually I can load up from here. So this is the path C. I'm gonna do this properly. So as you run off of, you're on this tile that you're walking. As you run off of it, he is forced to look right. And when it says stuck right, that means the entire time, as you run out of the grass, for as long as you can see the NPC, he will face right no matter what. And that's that. In the other two paths and examples, it says down after leaving grass. So what that means is that he will look down again after leaving the grass, but the time you have to see him is literally going to be only one tile, because he makes that turn on the last tile of visibility for him. So I'm going to play this out. So when it says after leaving grass, his turn down starts here? Yep, there. So before then, looking left, and it says soon as you start your animation to walk onto the next tile, he looks down. So you're literally gonna have to catch it out of the corner of your eye on if he looked down or not. Honestly, trying to pay attention to that, sometimes not even worth it, because it could mess up your movement afterward if you're paying too much attention to this NPC. But that's the cue for when he would look down. There's also other the last movement listed that are different. We have like down on third to last grass tile, and down on last grass tile. And I'm gonna show those examples right now. I believe, let's see, this one, what's this one? Oh, well, I'll show the ending one anyway. So this one, he's looking right, and like I said, this is gonna cover the down on third to last grass tile. So it's going to be as you're entering onto this tile when he looks down. So I'll frame advance a bit, and he's looking down. And it's as you're entering that tile, because if I were to like unpause the emulator right now, Maze still finishes running onto that tile. Oh. If you're holding the direction. I'm an idiot, but basically looks down there, and you would finish running. In game, you would basically arrive on that tile and see that he had already looked a different direction. And then the other one is this one, which is down on last grass tile. So instead of, okay, good. I'm still on the emulator. Instead of looking down as you're going onto this tile, he's going to look down as you're entering the last patch of grass, which you just saw as I rewinded. So right there is when he decided to look down. So that's the other one. Now, really quick, I'm going to go over the different beginning ones that look similar. Or actually, I already went over that. Right one tile of forced right. So you know what that looks like, or I explained what that looks like, and now I'm going to show what that looks like. This is an example of him turning right one tile early of forced right. So it should be as I'm going onto this next tile. And there it is. So I'm not close enough to force him to look a direction, but he looked that early. But because the very next tile he's forced to look right, the timing is pretty hard to tell on which one you got, which is why I say just try and record your attempts, so that way you can for sure determine what kind of NPC path you got, because a lot of these are similar, or they're going to be hard to tell in the moment without a ton of practice. Let's see. Okay. Okay, really quick, I'm going to switch back to console. And I'm just going to show the movement that you would do to adjust for each path. So let's go back to this one. So here, all the movement in the beginning is standard. Oh, I don't have the Game Boy on. All the beginning movement is standard. None of that's going to change, no matter what path you hit. We're right about here, because you'll know the NPC you got once you're on this tile, or once you're moving onto that tile. So there's 3 different paths. There's Path A, Path B, and Path C. So anything that says Path A, and that's the one where he turns right after you pass the sign. If you get that path, as you're leaving this grass, you don't even do anything other than hug the wall, and you go to this tile to start the cutscene. If you get a Path B, so that was one where he stuck down, he didn't look right or any direction until he was forced to. For that path, you're going to run to this tile, and then run up 1, and then across and up. So once again, that's like that, and you're good. The other path is path C, the very first frame that you can hit. So that's the one where you can see him turn left before he's forced to turn right. And for that movement, you would run here, up 2, across, and then to the Devon Guy tile. So that's what the different movements look like. Path A, path B, whoops, messed that one up. I'm just going to spray the repel so that way I have an easier time getting it. Path B. And then path C. So that's how the ending movement looks like. I tried to put pictures of the cues in the notes, but without context, it can be hard to understand. So just wanted to show off what the movement would look like. That's pretty much it for explaining how the different parts of the manip work. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it for explaining how every part of the manip works. I'm going to say some disclaimers really quick. For one, because the windows of this manip are small, and you're going through 2 sections of RNG where the RNG is going to be advancing 2 times speed. The precision of your A presses is extremely important for every single set of beeps in this manip. Like I said before, if you're at a point where the RNG is advancing by 2, and you make a small, like 1 or 2 frame mistake, that mistake is doubled. So if I was 2 frames late, then by the RNG frame, I'm going to be 4 frames ahead of where I wanted to be. So, not good. So, like I said, with every single A-press, including all of the Wingle ones, you want to be as precise as you can be for every single part of this manip. It's going to give you the best consistency, the best accuracy. It's going to help you figure out your offsets faster. You want to be as precise as possible. So every single attempt, you are hitting A in the same general time. That way you're not spending any more or less time in a part of the manip each run. Let's see. Okay, and an example of like knowing how precise your A presses are. For me, usually when I do runs, I'll normally see only 1 specific Wingle path, or maybe 2 specific Wingle paths the entire day. Like I do Wingle manip over 10 times, and 7 of the times I got path 2, and the other 3 I got path 1. So I know that my A press is pretty precise because I keep landing the same frame every time. Another example of precision, a funny one because it relates to the manip, is when Wave would talk about after he does Wingle and goes into the Aqua Pooch fight, he felt like he was manipping turn 1 sand every time because his mashing was so consistent up to that point. He would just see sand attack on turn 1 as soon as he entered the fight. So that would be another thing that's precise. And also, Wave wasn't wrong. There's literally a ton of sand. A ton of sand frames if you're just mashing through. So, congrats on manipping sand. Another disclaimer I want to say is that people have been asking me, what health do you want before the manip? At what HP should you potion beforehand? Because if you're doing the manip, you're not going to be able to potion after you catch Wingle. So you have to make that decision before you even do the save. To answer that question, it really needs further testing. More people need to be doing the manip. We need to see what HPs are fine, what the general outcomes are for people, and how much damage on average they're taking. For now, what I would say is if you want to play extremely safe, you would heal 16 HP and below. That way you can live basically every outcome of the fight, no matter what. If you don't want to do that, because that likely means you're eating up a whole extra potion, which is not great. You can still heal as normal. Like, in the notes, I believe it says if you have less than 13 HP, you should heal that. But if you have 13 HP or higher, just enter the fight with it. I've entered the fight with 13 HP, and it's worked out fine. But depending on what RNG you see, that HP could not be fine. Because Poochiana could crit you, and then you're in a problem. Let's see. I'll mention that in the next section. Okay. The last thing I want to go over for the disclaimers is I want to really quickly go over what defines a success for doing this manip. So, obviously, the top end of this manip is you never see any sands, you get a very fast fight, you get 2 crits, and you 3-turn the Pooch. That is the best possible outcome of this fight, but let me be clear, you are not expected to get that outcome every time. You're not even guaranteed to see a single crit when you're doing the manip. But just because you don't hit any crits doesn't mean that the manip necessarily failed. The natural variance in when you press your A presses, because like even though, for example, I feel like I'm pretty precise on all my A presses, not every single one of them is going to be frame perfect, and because of that, there's going to be a little bit of natural variance for where my A presses actually land in the RNG. So because of this, if you got through the fight in 5 turns, I would consider it a success for the manip. Since if you got a 5-turn fight without doing any manip, you would probably say that was a good to great outcome, considering how bad the fight can go. The most important benefit of the manip was to drastically lower your chances to die to Aqua Pooch, and drastically lower your chances of losing time or losing significant time to this fight. And this manip absolutely accomplishes that. The crits that you can get on each turn are essentially a bonus. So that's it for explaining the manip and that part. The next part of this video, I'm going to explain how you would figure out your offsets to do this manip. And one other disclaimer that I had in the disclaimer section, but it makes more sense in this part, is that if you don't get one of the NPC paths that you're aiming for, like let's say you end up realizing that you got a couple of frames late or a couple of frames early of the 5-frame window, my advice would be just continue the manip, because you want battle results that can be identified that you can then adjust your offsets from. And even with my offsets set, I go into the run, I'm not hitting the 5-frame window every time, but if the NPC path I got looked similar to one that I was looking for, but it was just slightly off, I just continue the manip anyway, because in some cases, even if you're a couple of frames late of the window, the RNG frame that you arrived at Devon Guy on is sometimes only like 1 frame later or 1 frame earlier. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to abandon the manip for a difference that small. Like, it's not going to affect you that much. However, if you know you're really off, or you know your A prices were really bad, then I would say abandon the manip. But let me continue on to how to figure out your offsets. So, really quick, the only thing that is going to help you figure out your offsets is going to be a ton of trial and error. It's going to take a long time for you to figure out your offset. Let's see. So I'm gonna say how I found my offset. And let me actually go back to BizHawk so I can explain what I did. When I first tried this manip on stream, I actually got a 2-crit. I got a 2-crit fight first try. However, I did not see one of the 5-frame NPC paths that I was looking for, and I executed the movement incorrectly. So I knew I was way off, but I still got the outcome that I wanted. Now, it's important that I know that I got the outcome that I wanted, because what you can do in BizHawk is you can recreate what you did and figure out how far off you were going into the enter the battle A press. So, really quick, I'm going to... I keep pressing the wrong thing. So, I'm going to go here. I'm just going to go to... I think it was path 2. So, I'm going to press A here. Play it out. Okay, well, that was a bad idea. I have it at 400 speed, so... you know what? Not really important that I do it from there. But let's just recreate what I did here. I know when I got the Manip working, the guy was... what was it? Right one tile early, a forced right, and then he was stuck right. But I still got the Manip to work. So, let's recreate that movement. I'm going to... Oops. This is usually the frame that you want to press B on. Gonna advance. Oops, a little too far. Gonna have to use a repel really quick. Okay. Good. Okay. So, the example that I got when I first tried it was this one. So, I'm gonna press B here and forest now. As you can see, he's gonna turn right one tile early. It was, since it was my first attempt, it was still too hard for me to even determine if he had turned early or not a forced right. But I did movement that looked like this. And then I got here, and I ended up turning one tile, or turning up one tile early. So, I don't know if I said it before, but if you do all the correct movements on the correct NPC paths, then the frame that you arrive to Devon Guy on is going to be 5165. So I'm going to continue this. And we're going to get here. And that frame I determine is the first frame he spins up, because that's an automatic part of his cutscene trigger, is that he'll flip up. So there he flips up, and it was frame 5172. I didn't recreate the exact movement that I got, because I know that when he flipped up was RNG frame 5170 for me when I first did it. But now you know that, like, if I hit that frame and did this movement, when I arrived to Devon Guy by RNG frame is 7 frames later than what I was aiming for. So what that means is, if I was able to hit the Manip, like get a 2 crit fight from here, and I arrived here 7 RNG frames late, then I should move all of my offsets once I'm, like, from this point onward, I should move everything 7 frames earlier. For me, I arrived here at 5170, so I knew I needed to lower everything by 5 frames, since I got it to work when I was 5 RNG frames late. And after I lowered the rest of my offsets by 5 frames, all of a sudden, boom, super consistent with the Manip. So that's going to be my best advice for people trying to figure out their offsets. I have links, as you saw in the notes, to both the BizHawk emulator and MK Dasher's Gen 3 Lua, so that way you can identify the RNG frames. There's also this number that I have enabled that I suggest you also enable. I don't know if it shows this, but you would have to go to View, and you would click on Display Frame Count to get that white number. And that will normally show you the frames from... If you did a reboot core, then that number is going to start from 0 on your soft reset. If you just do a regular soft reset, that number never resets, but I purposely made these save states from a rebooted core, so I know this is exactly how many frames from soft reset this RNG frame appears. But you would use like a combination of that info and what I just said earlier about like when you get a fight that gets the results that you want, you would work backwards in BizHawk to identify how much you should adjust your frames. That's exactly how I fix my offsets, and it's worked like that for the most part ever since. Let's see. But yeah, well, when you're starting out, it may be hard to determine like which exact frame you got for recreating the manip. Just do it to the best of your ability and try and figure it out, and just keep trialing and erroring it until you find your way to getting the right offsets when you get the paths that you're looking for. Another thing I want to remind again, I already said it before, but you want to keep the precision of your A and B presses in mind. Depending on how precise you are with each A press, it'll determine, it can change your outcomes by more than a few frames. And even if you're super good with precision, you're still likely going to be a little off each time. But basically, when you're trying to figure out your offset, you still want to focus on, I am pressing A at the exact same timing every single time. That way, you know when you do that timing in a run, it's not going to feel any different, and you're not spending any more time in a certain part of the manip than you should, and advancing or not advancing RNG the amount that you should. Let's see. Because yeah, if you don't bother to be precise with your A presses while you're figuring out your offsets, your results are going to vary extremely wildly. One quick example of like something that helped with precision was when I was helping out Main for this manip. His results were definitely varying, and I suggested he should just count to 5 on every single offset for the manip. And once he started doing that, his A presses started becoming way more precise, and he was able to consistently get the manip. So that would be a suggestion I would suggest to people. Count to 5 for literally every single set of beeps in this manip, because it'll probably help you with your precision. But if you have another way to help you with that, just go with it. Just try and be as precise as you can. So I already said the BizHawk example. You basically want to keep trialing and error. Even if you don't get the NPC paths that you're looking for, just do the whole manip and see if you can get results that can be identified within the nodes. Once you are able to get a fight or 2 fights that have those types of examples, you can go into the notes and figure out exactly what parts of the manip that you're hitting. Let's just take down BizHawk really quick. So like, you'll be able to determine, oh, okay, I pressed A for entering the forest and it ended up being this frame. So you know how to adjust. And like, the reason why you'd want to do the fight is because you're hoping for examples that'll tell you where you are. Like, for example, getting a crit on turn 1 is a huge deterministic factor, because this one rolls for 10, and that one rolls for 10, and this one rolls for 11. So they literally do different damage, and you can visually see the difference. So if you get a turn 1 crit, depending on where the health bar is, you can immediately know what parity you're on, and you also know exactly the frame that you pressed A for to get that crit. And that's why you would use the notes to help you determine like where your A presses were on every part of the manip. For the record, this is not going to be what was I gonna say? You're not gonna be able to for sure determine the frame every single time. And that'll usually be on times where like you get things like tackle hit. So there's like it's not going to be any different from like a normal tackle or a normal turn. But if you start to see things where it's like, oh, on turn 2, when I pressed A, Pooch ended up critting me that turn for 11. So then you know, okay, I'm right there. Or I missed tackle when I went for this A press, so that means I was 1 frame late of the crit window. And you would keep doing that, so the idea is you want to keep attempting the manip until you get fights where you have identifiers in them, and then from there, work backwards to determine where your A presses were. When you are... What the fuck did I just do? Oh, I think I just... Oh, did I close a window? I did close a window on accident. It's fine. Anyways. Wait. Oh my god. Okay. Well, that's a video script. I'm gonna get rid of that, and I'm just gonna go back here. So, the things you want to keep track of when you are trying to figure out your offsets for this is you want to keep note of what Wingle path you got, what NPC path you got when you entered the forest, and if you can determine it, what parity you entered the fight on. So you would have to do your best to use the charts and the notes to determine that. One easy thing is if you ever get a turn 2 crit, like 99% sure you started the fight on even, because the turn 2 crits can only be hit by even, for sure. So depending on what you saw, you can know exactly what parity you were on. And let's see. Okay. Also, for when you are adjusting your offsets, I have to fucking open up the notes again. Once you have a decent idea of where you are, you want to adjust your offsets to hit these specific windows. So I'm going to really quick... is it this one? Nope. Okay, there's the notes again. So let's just go starting from here. So this is the one where you're manipping Pooch's turn 1 move. In the notes, I've bolded all of the frames that you want to center around. So you want to center around this frame for sure. That way, you're in the middle of the window, no matter if you're on even or you're on odd. And then same thing here. Most of the desirable outcomes for the next chart are around these 4 frames. And the reason why it's listed like this, like frame 7344 and then 7343, if they're together in a row like this, that means, let's say, you get this outcome when you press A on frame 5000 from soft reset. Depending on when you enter the fight, frame 5000 from soft reset will give you 7344 if you enter the fight on even, or if you enter the fight on odd, frame 5000 from reset would be 7343. Which is why these two are in a row together, because they're essentially the same frame. It just depends on what frame you entered the fight. But you want to center around 7346 and 7345. That reason is because, for one, plenty of good outcomes if you hit 7346 on the next chart. No matter if you see tackle or howl, you're guaranteed to see tackle the next turn. And same frame, 7345 for odd. No matter what you see, you'll get sand the next turn, and I'll explain right now why that's good. That's because you want to line up to this, so that way, if you are on odd, you will crit turn 1 by hitting that frame. And then you can use the HP bars to determine which crit you got. And if you can identify that, okay, I got the odd parity crit on turn 1. No matter what move you see on turn 1, you're going to get sand the next turn. And like I said earlier, sand is going to shift your parity. So even though you started on odd, you're guaranteed to see sand on the next turn and shift back over to even before you get to the turn 3 crit window. So now, even though you started the fight on odd, you crit turn 1, You're guaranteed to move to even before turn 3, and now you can try and get your second crit on turn 3. So that's why you would line up for these frames. For this one, this is the first of the turn 2 tackle offsets. You want to align around 79.82, specifically because there's a tackle miss. Like, you literally miss tackle if you're 1 frame late on this window. So you wouldn't want to align to this. You want to align more to this. The next window, you want to align closer to this, because once again, 1 frame late, you're going to miss tackle. And also, like, you have a little bit more room before you get to the next crit. And then, let's see. For turn 3, I said you either want to center around either this one or this one. If you center around 92.14 and 92.13, you're going to be in the middle of a 3-frame crit window. If you center around 92.12 and 92.11, you're going to be in the exact middle of the 5-frame window, and you're going to be further away from this tackle miss if you're on odd that you'll get on the same frame that you get the final crit for even. That's pretty much it. Oh, I also said center around here, and then I didn't bold any of this, but that one was more complicated, and I explained it earlier. But that's basically what you would want to center yourself around once you've figured out your offsets a little bit, or once you're starting to hit and get consistent battle results. That's what you want to aim for. Once again, I'm going to say it is very, very important that you record yourself. The NPC movements are hard to read, can differ by a single tile, so you're better off just like looking at a VOD or like clipping yourself, and then determining accurately afterward what specific NPC path you got, instead of just relying on your eyes every time. So I would say definitely record yourself. And as far as figuring out your offset, that's all I really have to say about that. Other than that, you could ask people for their offsets so you can get a general idea of how far apart each offset should be. General figuring out offset stuff. It's going to be different for everyone. It's just going to be a lot of trial and error to find out yours, more than likely. But it can be sped up or assisted by using BizHawk and Lua. But that's pretty much it for that. I'm going to go back to this. So that's the end of that part. The only part I have left is called maximum consistency. I said before that like the variance is going to be pretty large on this manip, but even if you're a little bit off here and there, or even if you don't get on the right parity, in most cases, you're going to get a better than average fight. So this advice doesn't need to be taken by everyone, but if you specifically want to make getting the best outcomes of this manip as consistent as possible, this is the advice that I have for you. Once again, 1, focus on the precision of your A presses in practice and in attempts. It's the single biggest thing that's going to affect your outcomes every single time. And then the only other thing I really have to say is, for the maximum amount of consistency, your A press for entering the fight, the one where he's saying, "Come and battle me," while you're standing, I can move this. When you're standing here and you're about to clear this text box, that A press, if you're trying to be as consistent as possible, you want to adjust for it. Depending on the NPC path you got when you entered the forest. And that is important. And basically, what that means is you'll see what path you got in the forest, and depending on the path you got in forest, you want to slightly adjust every single one of your A presses from that point on by a certain amount. So I'm going to show the notes one more time, because I have this section, which is the adjusted A press consistency chart. So it lists the frame from soft reset, that the Wingle path plus NPC path will line up to RNG frame 6100 in the game. RNG frame 6100 is the frame that you are trying to hit to press A to enter the battle. But as you can see from these results, depending on what path you got for Wingle, and then depending on what path you saw when you entered the forest and which specific frame you saw that path on, the frame that gets RNG frame 6100 changes slightly. For these first two, path 1 and path 2, they're exactly the same, and that's because, as you can read in the notes, all the path 2 RNG frames are shifted 1 frame early. So it actually lines up perfectly with path 1. But for like path 3 and path 4, as you can see, like if I hit the middle one, or let's just say I hit the first frame because that's the easiest to identify. Path C, 4375, is when the RNG frame would line up. And that's the same as path 1, but getting the third entry frame into the forest, path A, 4375. The reason why this is important to note around all of this stuff is and why you have to adjust is because your offset is always going to be set to a specific frame that you're trying to hit every time. It's static, it's not going to move. However, depending on when you enter the forest, your frame, the frame that you want to press A on to enter the fight is going to be different for each path that you get. So that's why if you want to go for maximum consistency, you have to know what Wingle path you got and what NPC path you got in the forest, which is not going to be easy because you literally have 2 instances of path B and 2 instances of path A. My advice for that is going to be see if you're in general hitting late or in general hitting early. Like if you aren't getting these frames, are you getting late results or are you getting early results? Whichever one you're getting, assume that the ones that you're seeing in the run are going to be closer to that side. Like if I'm hitting early, I'm going to assume that I'm hitting the first path B or the first path A. And if I'm hitting late mostly, I'm going to assume that I'm hitting the second path B or the second path A. And that's how I would adjust. But yeah, so just keep in mind, if you want maximum consistency for this manip, you will have to adjust all of your A presses depending on NPC path in the forest. Okay, let's see. Like I said, you do not have to do this. Most of the outcomes, like regardless of whether you account for this, are going to be better than average anyway. But like I said, if you want the maximum consistency, this is something you will have to do. And my advice also is that you keep doing attempts until you get a 2 crit fight with either a path 1 Wingle or a path 2 Wingle. What you're going to do is you're going to see what path you got during that attempt for the NPC path. And once you have that, you're going to know, okay, so like if I get path 2 and I got path A, so my A press was on 4375, or at least that's what I aimed for, and I got a 2 crit fight that time, that means I know my offset is centered around 4375. Which is good because path 1 and path 2 are going to be the same. So no matter what, if I get path 1 or path 2, and I see path A, I'm going to have no adjustment whatsoever. But now I know that for the other paths, I just have to shift it however much it's listed here. But if you align, like if you know your alignment to a path 1 or path 2 example that gets a 2-turn crit, that's going to be the best way to, like, you're going to pick whatever NPC path and Wingle path got a 2 crit fight, and you're going to want to center yourself around that and then adjust from there. Let's see. Okay, I mean, that is pretty much it. Really quick, going over what's on screen again one more time. I'm just going to read out the last part of the script. Path 1 and Path 2 align to the same RNG frames, since Path 2 has all of its windows for NPC pushed 1 frame earlier than the rest. Path 3 and Path 4 are off by expected amounts. because of frame of game entry and frame of forest entry. But once again, your offset is only ever going to be aligned around one certain timing, which is why you're going to have to adjust if you want the most consistency out of the Manip. And that's it for the maximum consistency part. So I went over how the Manip works. An example listed all the details in the notes. I went over how you would find your offsets and the best ways to do that. And then I went over advice for like the maximum consistency as well as accounting for NPC path. So that's pretty much it for this video. The last things I had were just talking about this fight. The Aqua Pooch fight in Forest was definitely one of the most annoying fights in the entire run. And it was probably the most annoying fight in the Roxanne split. It was super bad. I hated it. It was one of the reasons I hated grinding Saf, because the fight's just so bad and it's so early. And if you live, you don't really want to reset, but your pace took like a huge hit. Or sometimes you could just die and just waste all that time. I didn't want to keep losing runs to this fight, and I didn't want to lose pace to it. That's the whole reason I did a bunch of research into this Manip, to see if I could get something that was cool to work. Originally, the goal was just dodge sand on 3 turns, and what I found ended up being way better than that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I stream on Twitch at Mockwing. If you ever have any questions about the Manip, honestly, you could just go to my chat and ask me if I'm live. I also have a Discord. You can go into the Discord and ask me. And once more people do this Manip and have it figured out, you should be able to ask about it in the Gen 1 through 3 Discord if you ever need any advice. That's going to do it for me. Everyone who's attempting this, I wish you luck in getting the fight, figuring out your offsets, and having better runs from now on.